Wait, are we ready? Hello, everyone. Hopefully you can hear us and see us. We'll be starting momentarily. Lots to talk about today. We'll try and jam it into 2 hours. Whether or not we're successful is another story. We do have a hard out, though, because we do have other things just to be getting on with today. So we will try our best to fit it all in. And Unigram's crash. Thank you very much. All right. I'm ready to go when you are.
Yep, just a few more seconds.
Let me know if our audio is balanced correctly. I had a few complaints last week saying I was slightly quieter for some reason. So if that sounds like that's the case, let us know now so I can fix it.
Bring up the notes in the recorder. Okay, I'm now recording.
I'm now recording.
3, 2, 1, clap. Welcome to the Windows Central Podcast, episode 326 for September 29th, 2023. Hey everyone, Dino Rubino here, joined with Zach Bowden for another exciting episode of the Windows Central Podcast. We are back after 1 week break. And a lot of news, of course, has happened since, and not all of it was great, but there was some good news too. We'll, of course, do a recap of the Surface event in New York City and what went on there. And then the probably the biggest news there, Panos Panay is leaving Microsoft, which is some of our worst fears. But we'll talk about that, what that could mean. We'll also talk about the future of the Surface portfolio, what's going to go on there. In good news, Windows 11 Fall Update rolled out and seems to be doing really well. It has over 150 new features, and we're pretty positive about it so far. I'm really liking it. We'll also go through what is considered to be the largest Xbox leak in history, partially due to Microsoft's fault, but it was kind of funny. Lots of news came out of that. We'll also talk about, there's a Windows 7 leak issue, which I didn't read the details of, but Zach will talk about that. And then there's the Qualcomm Orion. So for those who remember, Orion is Qualcomm's new next-gen processor. Should be unveiled within about three and a half weeks for the first time to the press out in Hawaii. We'll be there, of course, to cover it. But there was a reported issue that came up regarding OEMs and the use of this chip. It's not all bad news, though. Some other news came about regarding its performance, which actually seems to be a positive as well. But we'll get to all that a little bit later. Zach, how are you doing after 2 weeks off?
I am not too bad. I'm very refreshed after my trip away. It was very much needed. Too bad I took it on the worst 2 weeks I could have possibly taken it on in the year.
You and Jez Corden both took off during the worst time.
It's so annoying because I've not had a proper vacation in years. And so for the first time ever, I was like, okay, this is going to be a proper vacation. I'm going away. Going to try and disconnect for as much as possible. And then Panos Panay leaves. Microsoft holds a Surface event. Biggest leak in Microsoft history. It's like, come on, guys. Can't I have a break? Apparently.
Seriously.
Apparently not. And so I was working on holiday, much to my partner's severe upset, but we're over it now. We're through it. We got through it in the end, and so we are here. We're doing the podcast. We should start with, I think, the official stuff, the Surface event, and then we'll go and get more and more into the stuff as we go. So we'll start the Surface event, which was held on Thursday last week or Wednesday last week, September 21st or 23rd, was it? I don't remember now. No, it was September 21st.
21st.
Yeah. In New York City. Dan was supposed to be on the ground, but decided last minute wasn't worth it. And
well, I had some other issues going on too, but yeah, it was yeah.
And to be fair, I think that was the right call. The event itself was a little bit of a letdown, at least for me personally. We'll get Dan's thoughts in a minute. We'll start with the sort of highlights. The overall event was very much a Surface and AI event, or I guess maybe AI and Surface. I know there's been some contention about whether or not it could be counted as a Surface event. I very much think it was a Surface event, and there was Surface hardware there, even if it wasn't very exciting. But yes, it was a more general Microsoft event, and there was other stuff in addition to Surface. They opened with the Microsoft Copilot stuff. The big announcement there was that they are rebranding all the different Copilots as a single entity. So up until now, we had Windows Copilot, Microsoft 365 Copilot, Bing Chat. That's all being merged under one brand called the Microsoft Copilot. It's got a new logo, a nice colorful logo.
Wait, but Bing Chat is not, well, it is still confusing because they're...
Right.
You're right. In Edge, they're replacing the icon with the new Copilot icon, which
Right.
looks really nice, by the way. But it still says Copilot powered by Bing Chat.
That's right. Yeah, they're for some reason they're still pushing that Bing advertisement. I don't know why. It's not as if people are like, "Oh, it's Bing. I want to use it more now." It's no one's thinking
Right.
that when they see that. But yeah, you're right. In the interface stuff, it will still say Bing Chat, and on Bing.com, to my knowledge, actually, does Bing.com still say Bing Chat, or does it say Copilot now? I don't know. But yeah, the idea is they're trying to merge all of the Copilots and all this sort of AI stuff under one brand, that being the Microsoft Copilot. And then they went on to contradict themselves in the event themselves by calling the Microsoft 365 Copilot. And so they didn't call it Microsoft Copilot. They kept referring to it as the Microsoft 365 Copilot, which is so Microsoft if you think about it. But that was the sort of big opening announcement, was Microsoft Copilot is a thing. And there wasn't really any new stuff in regards to what Copilot can do. They sort of rehashed everything we've seen over the last 7 months, from the beginning with Bing Chat and how it can query multiple things at once, to plugins, which was announced at Build in May. There really wasn't much. I guess maybe there was a new thing with Microsoft Shopping. Shopping now has a Copilot and whatnot, which I guess is quite interesting. They also announced that Microsoft 365 Copilot will be launching on November 1st for enterprises, and then it will be launching for consumers next year, which is all stuff I had revealed beforehand, other than the date for enterprises. But that's not really worthy of an event, in my opinion. But yeah, that first 20 minutes all about the Copilot stuff really was just a sort of recap of everything they've announced regarding Copilot so far. A lot of the demos were the same or similar, all of its capabilities. They didn't announce any new capabilities, to my knowledge, and that was curious. I
Not
certainly
even with not even with that Enterprise.
Not to my knowledge. They announced Microsoft 365 Chat, which was announced back in March. It's got a new name now, to my knowledge. But again, that's a rebrand. I don't know if that's worthy of an event. So I was confused as to why they even brought Copilot up. I thought this event would be much more focused on the third-party plugins. I believe they demoed Adobe as one example of third-party plugins, but that was it. I was expecting a lot more, because plugins will make or break Copilot on Windows. That's what makes Copilot exciting and capable on Windows as a platform. Without the plugins, Copilot is kind of just Bing Chat with a little bit of smart AI stuff mixed in. So those plugins, I thought, were going to have a lot more time spent on it. I'm guessing Microsoft will maybe save that for Ignite, which is happening in November, which I guess makes maybe more sense. But up until right now, Copilot, which is now rolling out, is quite basic in its implementation, especially as a Windows assistant. It can do basic things like change your settings, change your dark theme, change wallpaper. It can even snap an app, but it's not...
There's still some cool stuff it can do. So, for instance, I was able to take a screenshot of a math problem and then just drag or copy paste that screenshot into Copilot.
That's true,
and
yeah.
then go and asked it to solve the problem
But again,
from an image.
that stuff
So used OC.
Copilot
I
can
know,
already
I
do.
know.
It's not new stuff.
Kind of. It's still been rolling out, but still kind of new.
Right.
I will say, though, the answer was incorrect.
You know
I
what?
did give Microsoft feedback.
Funnily enough, I just today put a video live on YouTube, just going through Windows Copilot, get hands on, trying it out. And one of the queries that I ask it is, what was Rihanna's last album and how many copies did it sell? I'm not a huge Rihanna fan. I mean, I've listened to her music, but I wouldn't know the name of her last album. So the answer it gave me was Unapologetic. That's not the name of her last album. I didn't realize at the time in the video. I've looked it up since. Unapologetic is, I think, a name of one of her songs. But Bing Chat was wrong, and I didn't realize, and I didn't call it out in the video. But that happens a lot, I think. And this is, people need to be careful about this. I think if I'm guilty of it. I'm sure most of us are guilty of it, where we just take a look at the answer that Bing Chat gives us and go, brilliant, thanks, well done. I didn't think twice about it, and I think because I'm still looking at it as a traditional internet search, where you type in a thing and you get the top query, and there it is. Where that's not how Bing Chat works, of course. It's querying multiple sources and coming up with a general answer that it thinks is the most common, which apparently isn't always correct. So need to be careful with that when you're using Bing Chat. But overall, yeah, for me, the Copilot announcements were a little bit of a letdown. I was expecting a lot more in regards to third-party plugins, which didn't come, unfortunately. And then we moved on to, what else did they announce? They announced Windows 11, the new Windows 11 feature updates. Now, this was a mess in itself, and we'll get into more of this in a minute. But on stage, they sort of announced that, hey, the next Windows 11 update's coming on September 26th. Here's a whole bunch of things it will have in it, including Paint Co-Creator, which is AI generative images in Paint. We did talk about that as coming a few weeks ago. It's now official, though it's not rolling out just yet. It's still in preview. It's coming officially later. They unveiled, they highlighted all the sort of things, the biggest things that we've already seen in testing in the Insider program over the last few months. So OCR and snipping tool, the improvements obviously to Windows Copilot being a thing in the OS now. Lots and lots of changes like that. And then, the event was over and people were like, yep, 23H2 is coming on September 26th. Except 23H2 isn't coming on September 26th. Microsoft did not make this clear on stage at all. But the feature update that has launched on September 26th is another moment for 22H2. It just so happens to include all of the 23H2 or 99% of the 23H2 features we were testing over the last few months ahead of 23H2, which is coming in a few weeks. We'll talk more about this as we get to it through there, but there was a lot of confusion over what this update actually is, and the answer is it's not 23H2, and we'll talk about why a little bit later. Then, as I mentioned, there was Copilot shopping, which is cool, I guess. I've never used Microsoft Shopping. I think it's a US-only service, right? So I guess that's the reason why I've not come across it. But Dan, have you used Microsoft
I haven't gone to... Well, I haven't gone to the site. It's like Bing Shopping, I guess. So I've never gone to it as a destination site. I use Bing Shopping in the sense that when I'm buying something, it offers coupons or shows me where I can get it possibly cheaper, which is actually pretty useful. So I like that aspect of it, but I haven't tried. Yeah, so like they demonstrated like some new features with this, right? Like you can take a photo of something out in the world and then upload it and be like, what is this thing? Where can I buy it? And then Bing will kind of give you those, look it up and try to ID it, and then give you the link for it. They also used a demonstration, like the woman, she was trying to buy cleats for her kid, and she didn't know anything about cleats for soccer. And so she said that I'm looking to buy cleats for my child, and what are the recommendations? And it was pretty smart. Like I walked through, it's like, are they what level are they, beginner, intermediate, all this, and then are they playing on grass, on turf, indoors? And it went through all these kind of questions, and then it generated like a graph with the different types of cleats available and different prices, and kind of comparing the features, which was pretty cool. So I mean, I think I was actually really impressed with some of the AI stuff. Now a lot of it is true that it's not like necessarily here today, but like I think the ability to drag and drop like photos into Bing Chat or Copilot and then have it do something with it. Like I said before, like you can, drag an image full of text and be like, summarize this, and it'll use OCR, it'll pull out the text, it'll summarize it for you. I think that's really kind of cool. That's technology most of us have not had access to ever. Or you can be like, translate this and it's going to do that. We've had that on kind of smartphones a little bit. I think that's where, this technology is going to come into play. Like they give the example of using it in like PowerPoint, or like you're creating like in PowerPoint, you need to generate images a lot of times for your backgrounds or something like that. Or she was going to do a blog post, and she asked Copilot to generate a blog post based off of this document with the talking points. And it did, including the tone and everything. Then she was like, oh, I need a banner for the top of this blog post. And it generated one for her, using even one of her photos. So you can really manipulate. And then you can go into the photos and be like, remove, people from the background. And there's like a lot more of these like image manipulation tools, which I think is going to be kind of a big deal. And then of course they also mentioned now that Bing Image Creator is going to be powered by DALL-E 3, which is a huge step up in quality. I mean, this starts to look really good right now. They were falling a little bit behind on this, with Bing Image Creator wasn't as good as some of the other ones, sometimes which are pay, but this is going to be free still, although I think it'll be powered by credits. So I think that's kind of neat. And then of course there's also the stuff with Microsoft Paint that's coming. Like Paint is turning into like finally someone at Microsoft is like, yo, let's go all in on Paint. They're adding the layers. They added background removal. Of course, there's dark mode, and now they're adding Copilot to that, where you can ask it to generate images and then just copy paste right into whatever you're working on and staying within the app itself. I think all this stuff is actually really kind of neat. They also showed, although this was for Bing Chat Enterprise. So they're calling it still Bing Chat Enterprise there. They didn't call it Copilot as far as I know. Uh, and the difference there is when you're in it, it's siloed and it gives you a message at the top saying all your everything is secure. And the difference there is none of the information you're typing in goes back to an AI training model, and it doesn't go back with Microsoft or it's ID'd in any way to Microsoft. So that companies can have a secure connection and not have to worry about the data they're putting in there is going to somehow leak out. That's kind of neat. But they also showed how, like, using like Microsoft Teams and everything like that, like you can ask Copilot to summarize, like go through your emails, find the top important ones, summarize them, give you action points. Unfortunately, they didn't show that for like the new Outlook that's now rolled out to pretty much everyone, or starting to roll out for people, especially with this update. I think that's a feature a lot of people would want. I think I envision the day where you get up, you turn on your PC, and Copilot is basically looked at all your important emails that came in, your calendar for the day, and kind of just gives you a summary. Gives you also action things to work on. Hey, you got to respond to this email. This person messaged you a couple of days ago. Gmail already kind of does this. If you sometimes if you get a message, you don't respond, it bumps it back up after a couple of days, and it's like, this person emailed 3 days ago, respond, which is kind of a cool feature. And I think we're going to see more of that stuff. And I think that's really, that's going to be the big step here, is the proactive gathering of information that's in your life and distilling it into simple, readable text and bullet points.
Yeah. So with that, Microsoft also announced, of course, the Surface devices. We'll go through them now. There were no surprises here, to my knowledge. We were expecting Surface Laptop Studio 2, Surface Laptop Go 3, Surface Go 4, and a new Surface Hub, and that is exactly what we got. No more and no less. Although the pricing was... We were kind of on the money. I was $100 off for most of them. I said the Laptop Studio 2 would be $18.99 when it's now actually $19.99. But other than that, I think we were more or less on the money. So we'll start with the most boring, which I think is the Surface Laptop Go 3. Very minor update. Chassis is exactly the same. Feature set is exactly the same. The only difference, of course, is the processor on the inside has been updated from an Intel 11th gen to an Intel 12th gen, which is still very much last gen. But... This is a product that's aimed at students and people who don't really care about technology that much. It's not a big deal that it's an Intel 12th gen processor, but I know people will look at that and think, my goodness, that's kind of annoying, especially considering it starts at $800.
I mean, I will say I get the annoying part, but I've been saying repeatedly on the podcast that the 12th and 13th gen are pretty close to each other. Yeah. 13th gen is it is faster. Maybe a little bit better on battery life. It's a good 13th gen's great, but like the important part here is getting the small and big cores, the energy efficient ones and the performance ones. That's going to be, it should result in a pretty significant performance bump when you're using Laptop Go 3. And I'm talking about even like running applications in the background. This is where 12th is going to, really make a difference compared to 11th gen. So I think performance-wise, this is actually a really significant update. And yeah, it's 12th, not 13th, but that's also one of the reasons why they probably can do $899. I don't think people, consider this, that the fact that when you use older chips, Intel needs to get rid of those, and so they can charge less for them, which means companies can bring down the costs. And sometimes that's more important. We get wrapped up a lot of times on our podcast here and talking to our audience. Oh, it's 12th gen this, 13th that. Oh, the new one just came out. 14th gen's about around the corner. Most people don't know what the hell you're talking about or what that means or why it's important. But what they do know is when they go to buy a laptop, they look at that price. And that's what matters. And if they like the laptop and the price is within their range, that's all that matters. Then they get it home and open up. And then the question is the experience good? I think with 12th gen, I'm actually excited about this. I think for the first time, Laptop Go might be like I've always kind of liked Laptop Go. It's a fun device. My problem is I'm spoiled with so many other high-end laptops. But I feel like Laptop Go 3 with this 12th gen performance boost I think it's going to be the first time I start using it. I'm like, oh, this actually feels like just a normal laptop now without a lot of compromise.
Yeah.
Of course, there are compromises, which I'm sure you'll go through right now.
Yeah. So of course, just like the original Laptop Go and Laptop Go 2, still missing a backlit keyboard, which has been a big criticism amongst reviewers. And like I said, it's $150 more expensive now, and you're still not getting that backlit keyboard. And then of course, this is more of a personal issue. The display is still sub 1080p, and it looks not great. But a lot of people won't notice this. It's still a touchscreen. It's still a nice display. It's very punchy, but the resolution is on the lower side. It's certainly not a Retina level display.
Regarding the price, I didn't look at it too close. Isn't it? It went up, but is that only because they got rid of the the one with
Pretty
4
much,
gigs of RAM?
yeah. So they basically scrapped the entry level model, which before, if you remember, it was a 4 gigs of RAM with 128 gigs of storage. Or no, I think it was 64 gigs of storage. And then it also didn't have a fingerprint reader. That was the base model, and that was $599 or $549 when it first launched on the Go 1. They've basically scrapped that model, so that the step up model is now the entry level model, and that comes with basically double the RAM. 256 gigs of storage, and it comes with the fingerprint reader. So you are getting more for your money, but it's still like dumb.
I've been thinking about this, and like I might do something about this when I do the review or whatever. But like, I know, like again, a lot of people here jump on that. Oh, the price went up, but they got rid of the entry level model. All this. So there's two options here that are happening. One, that model, that $599 one, the entry level, was the most popular and sold the most, and they're getting rid of it, in which case this is a really dumb decision, and Microsoft's just shooting itself in the foot. The other theory is that entry level model didn't sell that well, or was compared to the other SKUs on the lower end, and they sold more of that entry level model, or sorry, the secondary model with the double the RAM, more storage, fingerprint reader. I think people need to consider that. Like that could actually be the case, that this one, now that's the only one that you can start off with, is the best selling model. And they didn't mind getting rid of the entry level one because it didn't sell that well anyway, in which case this is a smart decision. We're not privy to this information, but you have to approach it from that. Like I said, they could maybe the entry level is the best selling, and they're just like really screwing themselves. But I feel like that'd be weird. They look at all their data, and you just have a bar graph. Like you have like 4 models, and like the 599 one is like top. Like let's get rid of that one. Like how would that happen in a meeting, right? Like, so I'm tending to lean to the fact that, like I said, the 799 model, whatever, is the one that's best selling. Don't forget, Laptop Go 3, a lot of its customer base is enterprise and business. In fact, our very own company, Future, has distributed Surface Laptop Go 2s to pretty much all staff, which are a couple thousand people here because our company is so massive. Now, I feel bad for those people. I wouldn't want to do a lot of this job on Laptop Go 2. We're talking people like work with giant spreadsheets, and it's just like that thing starts to chug. So hopefully maybe that won't be a problem Go 3. But don't forget. So I think a lot of enterprise, we're buying that 799 model, and that's their primary customers. I would also say some schools are another set of customers, and then of course consumers as well.
The other change on the Laptop Go 3 is that they're actually offering it with more RAM now. So in addition to the 8 gig one, you can spec it out. You can max it out with 16 gigs of RAM and 512 gigs of storage. 512 gigs of storage, and that will cost you $1099. That's $1,100 for that. Now that is a lot of money for a laptop with a sub 1080p display. I'm thinking that one is very much aimed at the enterprise because, like you said, companies doing spreadsheets and stuff and crunching that data, they're going to need the extra RAM and the extra storage. And people with work laptops generally don't care about it, so it doesn't matter that it doesn't have a nice display and stuff. And so I think that's what that model is for exclusively. But for $799, you get 8 gigs of RAM, 256 gig storage. That's the one that will be aimed at most general audiences, students, this, that, and the other. To my knowledge, there is a $699 model which will be sold only to students, and that will have it will have 8 gigs of RAM. I think it has 128 gigs of storage.
Less storage.
And it doesn't have the fingerprint reader still. So it's still floating around that model, but it's only for students now. So you can save $100. I don't think that's worth it. I think you should get the extra $100, have the fingerprint reader, double the storage. I think it would for longevity reasons, I think that makes more sense because going back, I don't know if you feel the same, Dan, but whenever I go back to a laptop that doesn't have Windows Hello of any capacity, I feel like a caveman. I'm like, what am I doing punching in this 6-digit code? This is ridiculous. So yeah, definitely
that's pretty
spring
terrible
for the fingerprint reader model. So that's Laptop Go 3 in a nutshell. Launches October 3rd. We'll move on to Surface Go 4, which curiously wasn't announced on stage, but it was certainly unveiled at the event. It was there in the hands-on area, and it's on sale now and will ship early October as well. This model is curious because it's Surface Go 4, that's its official name, but it's only for commercial customers, unfortunately, which means you can only buy it through Microsoft's commercial channels. You can't buy it as an official consumer. That doesn't really mean much. Ultimately, it means you get it in a boring grey box versus a nice sort of consumer nice box. But the specs on Surface Go 4 are significantly improved over Surface Go 3. So we have the Intel N200 processor with 8 gigs of RAM and 64 gigs of UFS storage starting. That is a huge upgrade over the Surface Go 3, which started with a Intel Pentium Gold with 4 gigs of RAM and 64 gigs of eMMC storage. That device is just a much slower beast versus this newer device with double the RAM, faster storage, and a much better processor. I think it's like 50% performance increase or something. It's ridiculous how much better the Intel N200 is versus the Intel Pentium. Now, it's better, but you do pay more for it. I think the starting price for Surface Go 4 is $579, which is up from $399 on the Surface Go 3. But like I said, I think for the performance gains, that is worth it. You can get it with up to, I think, 256 gigs of storage, but only 8 gigs of RAM. There's no 16 gig model. The biggest change with Surface Go 4... Sorry, go on, Dan.
I was just going to say, I would love to have got my hands on this one because it's kind of the same issue where, the performance on the previous Surface Goes were just, it was fine, but it could always be like better. And I say that all processors could be better, but this one was like, it could really use a nice boost.
Yeah.
And now that it's getting an N200, which, in theory should be a much better processor, it's like, oh, now it actually sounds a little bit more interesting. Mm-hmm. I don't know.
I might get one. I'm tempted to get a Surface Go 4. Some sources were describing it to me as a mini Surface Pro. Like it's from a performance perspective, it's almost that good. So that's pretty cool to see. The biggest changes with it are on the inside. The design externally is identical, but on the inside, it's now a repairable surface. Surface Go 3 was the last little surface in the line that wasn't very repairable. This one is, you can replace the display, the battery, the motherboard, etc., etc. So that's nice, and that sort of brings it in line with all the other surfaces which have already had repairable designs for some time. So that's the Surface Go 4 in a nutshell. The black model's gone, so Surface Go 3 was available in silver and black. Surface Go 4 only silver.
Oh, I forgot about that.
Yeah, it's just a shame. I was the black Surface Go 3.
I've never seen the black one in person.
I've seen it at the Microsoft store, but yeah, other than that, because it launched late. For some reason, they launched it later than all the others, which is ridiculous. But yeah, Surface Go 4 is a thing, commercial only. All that really means is, like I said, it comes with Windows 11 Pro instead of Windows 11 Home. It also, you won't find discounts on it. That's the only other thing I've noticed. Unless, sometimes they do commercial discounts on the Microsoft Store, but I'd highly doubt you'll find it on other retailers. It also means you won't find it on Amazon or Best Buy. It's only available through those sort of commercial channels, which is a little bit of a shame. Then we've got Surface Laptop Studio 2, which... I think was the star of the show in regards to hardware. It was the one with the biggest upgrade. Intel 13th Gen H-series processor, 16 gigs of RAM in the entry-level model, Intel Core i7 in the entry-level model as well. They scrapped the i5 model, and up to NVIDIA 4060 GPU. New ports, has a USB-A port, micro SD card port, in addition to the Thunderbolt 4 ports and the Surface Connect port. It is thicker, and I believe it's heavier to accommodate for all this new tech and stuff, and the USB-A port specifically. And it's a really nice upgrade. HDR display, better, more accessible haptic touchpad, which is awesome to see. They made the haptic touchpad got a bit of stage time at the event. They talked about how this one is actually much more accessible for people who don't have fingers. Apparently, a lot of touchpads just don't work for them, but the Surface Laptops Studio 2 touchpad does work for them because they've done a lot of work to make that haptic touchpad usable with like a palm or the side of your hand and stuff like that. So that's pretty cool to see. But yes, that's pretty much the major updates for Laptop Studio 2. Pricing starts at $2,000. It's not cheap. The original one started at $1,600, but that was with an Intel Core i5, and that was 11th gen, so that wasn't as good. The Intel Core i7 in this is a beast to my knowledge, and it also has a dedicated NPU. It's the first, and to my knowledge, going to be the only Intel 13th gen laptop with an NPU
Yeah,
attached to it. That's because I guess Microsoft and
true.
Intel work together for that, and that gives it access to Windows Studio Effects and hopefully all of the more advanced AI stuff coming to Windows in the next year. But that's very unique to see, and kind of curious. Like, I'm really interested in this laptop now because I like the idea of having an Intel NPU based device. Of course, Intel 14th gen coming next year will have that all baked in on pretty much most, or if not all, sort of high end laptops anyway. But if you want one now, the Laptop Studio 2 is the only device that you can get with an NPU on an Intel machine. So that's that. And then lastly, very lastly, Surface Hub 3 was unveiled. Now, we knew a new Surface Hub was coming. I didn't know if it was going to be called Surface Hub 3 or just just a new Surface Hub 2S. But no, it's called Surface Hub 3, has an Intel 11th gen chip in it with 32 gigs of RAM. It's a much more powerful Surface Hub versus the 2S, which was using an 8th gen U series processor. That thing was incredibly slow. The new Surface Hub 3 is much faster. Does come with new Teams rooms on Windows, which is their new sort of shell OS for the Surface Hub. It can rotate into portrait mode now, which is fun. That's the thing they promised in 2018. It's finally shipping here in 2023. And the last thing is that it's a compute cartridge upgrade. So if you have a 2S currently, you can just buy the new cartridge and slot that into your current Surface Hub for $2,900, I think, or $3,000. It's not cheap, but this is an Inspire product. If you want to buy a brand new Surface Hub 3, I think that'll cost you something like 10 grand for the 55-inch and probably a lot more for the 85-inch. So there you are. That is the hardware roundup. Overall, Dan, what are your thoughts on this fall's lineup?
I mean, so I've said it before. The Laptop Studio 2 I'm really excited about. I really like the first version. Second version looks like it's improved in most areas. I think adding a Type A port it's great. It's great to have. You might not use it all the time, but that one time you need it, it's really nice to have. Micro SD slot, don't care about it, but I understand why it's there. A lot of people were asking for it, considering it's a creator laptop, so that makes sense. I think the big thing, of course, the trackpad, that's Sensel, by the way. It's the same makers who did the last one. It's just their next gen version of it. Very excited about that, as I'm a huge fan of haptics and feel like that's the future of that. This device is very kind of future leaning, which I think is really kind of cool. You mentioned the NPU. It's the only one that's going to have that. So in theory, that means when you do, studio effects, you shouldn't witness, degradation in performance, because before it was just relying on the main processors to do that. But now with the NPU should be able to handle that, which means your main cores on your CPU can just do whatever you're supposed to be doing. And so you won't see, I've seen laptops, even 13 Gen 1s with pretty fast processors, when you do the background blur or something like that, the camera starts to stutter a little. Like you see like a performance degradation in it. We shouldn't see that with this, and I'm really excited about trying that. So this should be like the first time it's like just really smooth, or it feels like you're operating on the desktop level. The big thing is, of course, is the CPU and GPU. These are significant upgrades. Again, you're going from 11th gen to 13th gen. And you're switching those cores up. This should feel way faster, much more responsive. Battery life should also still be as good. The Laptop Studio, I think, surprises people. It actually has like really good battery life for what it is. And I think the battery life for this one should still be really good, like all day, 8 hours. I think you should be able to squeeze out of it with no problem. Depending if you use the GPU, which now you get a 4050 or 4060. Those are, that 4060 is no joke. That's a pretty powerful GPU. Now, can you hardcore game on it for hours? Maybe not. The Surface Books you could game on for a while too. There's much better thermals on Laptop Studio than there was on Surface Book. So you should be able to game without too much performance drop. But if 4060 is going to allow you to do like some real hardcore gaming, and you combine that with the CPU and everything, and HDR now with the display, so it should be a little bit punchier. We'll see, Dolby Vision and all that kind of stuff. I think this is, I was on Twit yesterday talking about the tech and all this kind of stuff, and I said, Surface Laptop Studio for me is sort of the quintessential what a Windows laptop is capable of being. Like if someone asked me like what's the ultimate Windows laptop that demonstrates everything that the operating system can do, I would actually say it's a Laptop Studio, because it has that pull it forward display, which very few laptops have, that I can lay down into a tablet form. It has the pen built right in, right? It just sticks to the bottom with exceptionally strong magnets. Like you're never going to lose it. It's a haptic pen that feels awesome. It has very good audio. Um, and you can't even see the speakers, which is great. You have Windows Hello on there, of course, touchscreen. You're getting now with Windows 11 Ink Anywhere, which is going to make inking just much more impressive. And now you have the NPU on there, one of the first, I would almost say, a demonstration device of what is capable of having a localized NPU on your device versus doing AI in the cloud. And so when you combine all that stuff together, I just feel like this is like the ultimate Windows laptop. Plus being 14-inch display, it's like the right size too. I know some people complain like they think it's bulky or heavy or anything. I do not understand that at all. I feel the chassis and design is just awesome. It feels great to hold and carry around. Everything could be lighter, don't get me wrong, but I've never had a complaint about transporting that thing. So I just think it's a great laptop and demonstrates everything about Windows.
Yeah, I think in regards to weight and thickness, I think it's very similar to the MacBook Pro 14, right? I think that's kind of the point. It's supposed to be Microsoft's alternative to
Yeah.
the MacBook Pro 14. But yeah, no, the Laptop Studio 2 is certainly the star of the show this year. It's a shame that it's the only star of the show. I think it's fair to say
Yeah.
the lineup this fall is a little bit lackluster. There's not too much going on. The Laptop Go 3 really is just a refresh with an old chip. Not fantastic stuff there. The Surface Go 4 is actually a nice upgrade in regards to CPU performance and whatnot, but I would have preferred a slightly updated design, maybe slightly thinner bezels and stuff, especially since we're bumping the price up. Maybe it's time to start modernizing that design a little bit more as well. And then the Surface Hub, that's doing its own thing. So I guess that leads us nicely into our next topic and perhaps explains a little bit why the Surface lineup this fall is how it is. Panos Panay, who announced, or yes, Microsoft actually announced it, believe it or not. They sent us an email saying, hey, by the way, this email just went out internally. You may want to report on it. Which said Panos Panay was leaving Microsoft. He had decided to say his goodbyes. He's moving somewhere else, and it was unveiled a few days later that he is moving to Amazon. We'll talk about that in a minute. But it is official. Panos Panay, the head of Windows and Surface, is departing Microsoft. And in that announcement, they unveiled that Rajesh Jha, of course, is still sort of above Panos, and now Pavan. Let me get the thing up so I can actually read it. But yeah, the internal memos basically described all of the moving around within the Windows and devices org to accommodate for Panos's leaving. So I'll read the memo here. It says, after nearly 20 years at the company, Panos Panay has decided to leave Microsoft. Panos had an incredible impact on our products and culture, as well as a broader devices ecosystem. Under Panos' leadership, the team created the iconic Surface brand with loved products. More recently, as the leader of Windows, the team has brought amazing services and experiences to hundreds of millions with Windows 11 on innovative devices, including those from our OEM partners. He will be missed, and I'm personally very grateful for his many contributions over the years. Moving forward, we will double down on our strategy. These changes will be effective immediately with Panos' help in the transition. And then he goes on to, this is Rajesh, he goes on to list all of the orgs and who's reporting to who here. So this may not be interesting to you. I'll sort of give you the cliff notes. But there's an org building silicon systems and devices that span Windows, client, and cloud for an AI world. That team is led by Pavan Diviluri. I'm going to butcher some of these pronunciations. He will be reporting directly to Rajesh Jha. Brett Ostrom, who is, to my knowledge, the now current lead of Surface, and he has been for a while. We'll talk about that in a minute. Brett was on stage during the event to unveil the new Surface devices because Panos Panay had already announced that he was departing, so he wasn't at the event. Brett was the guy doing the on-stage demos. I thought he was okay. He certainly got to he was very facts-based, stuck to script.
I mean, we have to assume it was short notice.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because Panos was like
yeah.
weeks earlier, talking up going to New York City, and seemed like he was going to be the one doing it. So
for sure. Ralph and Steve Batchy are still there, or Bathy. He's still there. They are still there. So a lot of people sort of saw Panos, Stevie, and Ralph as the sort of trio for Surface and hardware design.
Yep.
Panos is departing. Ralph and Stevie are remaining. So in regards to design, we may be okay there. But
well, I want to clarify. So Ralph is the he's the designer. So he's the one that comes up, and he's German, like actually from Germany. He's a really nice guy too, but like he's very much into, I would say, kind of a brutalist design almost, where and that's why when I see Laptop Studio 2, or we know the latest Xbox series, the Xbox series had the design of it was influenced by the Surface team, because the Surface team is the hardware team. So he does a lot of the design stuff, which is great. Ralph, and then sorry, Steve Batchy is he has a really high position now. He's like, I forgot what it is
Yeah,
with
he's great.
it's a so- yeah, he's a scientist level. So he does primarily display technology. He works on the displays. He does the pen and inking stuff, oversees that. Basically, every time Microsoft has like sort of a breakthrough and sort of a technology, he's usually the guy leading it. He's like kind of a more of a research scientist type, but he really understands sound, display, pen, inking, and all that. So yeah, you're right. That trio, you'd always see them walking around
Yeah,
together, and they were
yeah,
like his like right hand men. So it's good that they're staying around. Hopefully they stick around.
yeah.
It's
Right.
who knows. We'll see what happens.
Actually, I think Stevie right now is working more on AI stuff, which is
Yeah, that's true.
unsurprising
Right.
considering
Yeah.
Microsoft's current trajectory. But yeah, I think he's working on AI stuff. But yes, those three are still remaining. There's a number of other names at which are, Ryan just says that they're all remaining in their teams. Windows planning and release management will continue to be in this team. And then he says, our commitment to Surface and mixed reality remains unchanged. And we'll talk a bit about that.
It's funny they threw in mixed reality to that,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, it is, certainly.
Like no one was asking, but but it's telling that they said it in the sense that they're publicly committing to it. They're saying no, we're still working on stuff
They
like
seem to
that,
have
which I think
plans there.
was
So yeah,
yeah.
we'll see what happens there. But we'll talk more about what that means in a minute. Then the email continues. The other org, building experiences that blend web, services, and Windows for an AI world. To this end, Shilpa Ranganathan, Jeff Johnson, and Ali Yakgun will directly report to Mikhail Parakin. Again, butchering all these names, and form a new Windows and web experiences team, moving with their teams intact. And then Yusuf Mehdi, and so there was a little bit of confusion around here because the email certainly makes it sound like this. Yusuf Mehdi will take on the responsibility of leading the Windows and Surface businesses with our OEM and retail partners. So that made it sound like Yusuf Mehdi was now the new lead of Windows and Surface. That is not the case. He's just in charge of the communication Microsoft has with companies like HP and Dell and Walmart in regards to selling Windows and selling Surface in those places. He's not in charge of the vision of Windows and Surface, to make that very clear. Then there's a number of other moving around here. Charles Simoni, Terry Chudzik, and Erin Cole will join the E&D management teams, and Ralph Groen and Mike Davidson will work together on the best alignment on design teams. So, lots of people moving around there, lots of new orgs being formed there. Windows and web experiences is very interesting. I've asked around about this org, and I have heard that division is in charge of a secret version of Windows that Microsoft is working on, which is another attempt at competing with Chrome OS. I'm still learning about this project. I plan to write about it a bit more in the near future. But that's kind of exciting to hear. This is very much another Windows 10X sort of effort, I think, but more web-based. But yes, with Panos leaving, lots of questions, right? Lots of questions around what does this mean for Surface? What does this mean for Windows going forward? Because it's fair to say with Panos being somebody who had a vision for both. He had a coherent vision. He wanted Windows to look good. He was very design driven. He understood that Windows 10 was very inconsistent in regards to design and feature set. He wanted to bring Windows up to snuff and compete with the likes of macOS and iPadOS. And, I think he did a good job there. His job hasn't been finished. Windows 11 still got holes here and there in regards to consistency and features. But compared to Windows 10, it's a night and day difference. Windows 11 is so much more polished in regards to aesthetic and design versus Windows 10. And that was all Panos. He took over Windows in February 2020. And I think by March 2020, he was already planning Windows 11, at the time codenamed Sun Valley. He moved quickly. And with him now leaving, I worry that Windows is going to go back to how it was when Terry Myerson first left. If you remember that period between 2017 and sort of 2019, 2020, where Windows Desktop was sort of left by the wayside. It was on the back burner. Nothing much was really going on there. And it really felt like it was being abandoned. Of course, internally, Panos was already working on Windows Core OS. Of course, he was doing Andromeda OS and Polaris, which moved into 10X. But on the public-facing, the desktop OS was very much left by the wayside. And I'm a little bit worried that might happen again. It won't be immediately, because obviously Microsoft has already set in motion what's happening for the next version of Windows. They're likely going to deliver on that. But what comes after that, I think, is when things get a little bit more shaky. In regards to Surface, a lot of people have said, "Oh, this is certainly the end of Surface, right? Surely this means we're going to go downhill. It's going to get more boring." And reports have come out since saying that Microsoft has cut back on the Surface portfolio. It's now focusing on its mainstream products, the devices that make the most money. Those being Surface Pro, Surface Laptop, Laptop Go, Surface Go, Surface Hub, and I believe Surface Laptop Studio to an extent as well. Everything else, which includes Surface Studio, the desktop, Surface Duo, the phone, Surface headphones, Surface earbuds, all of that is no longer in active development.
To be fair, like the headphones and earbuds and some of the accessories, I liked them. I thought it was cool that they were doing them. It was nice to see because we're fans of sort of the Surface team and their designs and sort of their theories behind stuff. So they could make a toilet, and I'd be interested in like, or what's your take on a toilet?
Yeah.
Like I just like seeing that from a creative team. Like how would they envision it? But that said, it was always a weird thing to do to break out from the current devices. Like I understood it, right? They made it like if you're going to have a Surface laptop, having Surface headphones works well. I get that, but it was still like really starting to spread themselves out thin. And I would also say that market is so just so competitive. Like you have Bose and you have Apple. And like then there's a couple of other brands, Sennheiser and all this kind of stuff. But like you're dealing with some real big league people. Like Bose just announced and released their brand new high-end headphones, which look really nice. And Bose are just like fantastic stuff. So I thought it was a weird thing to do. The experimental devices, though, yeah, something like Duo and Neo is a little bit, that's unfortunate because that is kind of where they cut their teeth. But my guess is, again, this is a business and they're just going to go where their best-selling devices are, which kind of makes sense. Laptop Studio has had years now to catch on, make a difference, lead the way. And I don't think we can argue it's been a success. I just don't. Like, I don't know the numbers, but like we haven't seen that genre, really take off.
You mean Surface Studio?
Yeah, sorry, Surface Studio. Now, I was confused too now. Surface Studio has been around for years. And so them, possibly getting rid of that, I think kind of makes sense. It's just, it was always cost prohibitive for most people, while the performance was always not that great for what you were getting. You were basically paying for a really, really nice display.
Right. So yeah, that's the reporting that Microsoft has basically streamlined its portfolio, and that was one of the reasons why Panos departed. Because of course, Panos being Panos, he most likely wanted to keep doing the phone. He wanted to make the more experimental hardware, and the leadership team were likely telling him, "No, you need to start making money. Surface has been a money pit for us. Please start making money." So that's perhaps one of the reasons why he departed. Another one of the speculative reasons why he may have departed is the vision or where Windows is going next. With the recent uptick in AI, a lot of the original plans for Windows V Next have been, I think, put by the wayside in favor of enhancing Windows with AI first. And so, a good example is, that sort of Mac OS style interface that you've seen that Microsoft leaked last year. That may or may not ship because that requires resources, and Microsoft could spend a lot more resources integrating AI into the existing interface instead because they've already got it, so it'd be easy for them to do that. So I think there may have been some butting heads in regards to the vision for the next version of Windows, which he may not have been a fan of, especially in regards to web, because web is going to play a key role in the future of Windows, whether you like it or not. Web technology is in, and Windows is going to adopt it as much as it possibly can. Edge will be a catalyst for all Windows experiences going into 2025 and beyond. So, that may be another reason why he wasn't too keen on where Microsoft was going with Windows and AI. Who knows? This is all speculative stuff, but he is departing. And I've had people asking, this must mean Surface is going to sort of die as well at some point, right? Or at the very least get more boring. I've asked around about this, and obviously no one can tell the future, but based on the conversations I've had with sources, we're already seeing the effects of Panos not being in charge of Surface. When he took over Windows in 2020, Windows isn't a small thing. That took up most of his time, I think. And Brett Ostrom, I think, has been, air quotes, leading Surface for the last year or so already. the surface as it is now is already a surface without Panos leading it. If you know, if you understand what I'm trying to say. So
Yeah, he had to start delegating.
yeah, absolutely.
His authority. Yeah.
So I don't think we're going to see things get much worse in regards to the kind of things they ship. In fact, I'm hearing for the next Surface Laptop and Surface Pro, there's going to be quite a big upgrade on the Surface, especially for the Surface Laptop. That might be very interesting for a lot of people. This will tie into the next version of Windows and AI. Again, that's a story for a later date, but there's exciting stuff coming in regards to Surface Pro and Surface Laptop at least. But I think we're already seeing the effects of a Panos-less Surface, and it's in the form of what we've got this fall, essentially. And essentially what we had last fall with the Studio 2 Plus and the laptop, the Pro 9 and whatever else it was they announced last year, Laptop 5. Those were just refreshes. There wasn't much going on there, no new form factors. And then this year was, again, another very minor year for Laptop Studio and whatnot. So
and listen, let's be honest, right? Even if they shrunk down, maybe putting aside the Go devices, because the Go devices reportedly do sell a lot just because of their price points. But putting those aside, even if they just kind of, and I wouldn't ever want them to get rid of Laptop Studio, but I don't know how that sells, Hopefully it's doing well in this next version. But even if they just fell back to just making Surface Pro, that would be unfortunate.
Yeah.
But I would still be kind of okay with it because the Surface Pro, there's still nothing like it on the market. And I don't think Microsoft would ever get rid of that. And you're right. Someone's asking, what about Surface Pro 10? I think they were probably smart to hold off this year because it literally would have just been, we put a new processor in it.
Yeah.
And maybe we tweaked the camera a little bit with some software, right? It would have been some kind of BS Apple, upgrades, But next year is where you're going to get the Intel Meteor Lake, which is a really big update in terms of performance and efficiency. I would rather wait for that. Mm-hmm. You're also going to see Qualcomm's Orion chips, which we'll get to later, are also supposed to be very good. I'd rather wait for that too. Have the AI stuff build out in Windows 11, and then next fall they get on stage and show these updated devices that are going to be really a generational shift in terms of power, performance, and abilities, especially when combined with the AI in Windows 11. I think that's a great story to tell. Mm-hmm. I don't think them skipping a year or whatever with Surface Pro is that big of a deal because these devices aren't high volume anyway. They're more about banner devices. And I think that they could afford to do that. But I'd be okay with them just doing Laptop Studio, Laptop, and Pro. If those were the only three devices they had to do going forward, I'd be actually totally fine with that.
Yeah. Well, the portfolio they have now is because they are the ones that sell the most. I think they're keeping the Go's around because they are very popular with enterprises. Yeah. I hear Surface Go, not the laptop, but the Go itself, is incredibly popular with enterprise. They sell hundreds of thousands of units to enterprises there. So, of course, that's sticking around. And all the others, I think Surface Pro and laptop are the sort of mainstream surfaces, and of course, they're going to keep them around as well. But those are coming next year, and as Dan was right, completely right, Intel 14th Gen, Qualcomm Orion, big upgrades in regards to AI and stuff coming next year as well, and they're going to package that up neatly with the next version of Windows, whatever that ends up being. So that's all to come, and that's very exciting. And that's going to be led by all the new people who Panos Panay is leaving behind, right? That's Brett, that's Pavan, that's Mikhail, there's everybody. So that's going to be super interesting to see how they pull all of that off. A couple of things I've seen on people saying on Twitter is that wasn't Surface always about experimental design and stuff? That's not really true. I mean, the original purpose of Surface was to push OEMs to build better hardware and also be a stage for Windows 8 for touch. That was kind of the point of Surface. And Surface, I think, did good on both fronts there. It was the best touchscreen Windows 8 device, in my opinion. And it did convince OEMs to make better hardware. The PC space these days in the high-end section is so much better than it was in 2011 when everything was plastic and the MacBook Air was the best laptop out there. That's no longer the case, I think. I think that you can find much nicer designs on the PC side. So Surface, did its job there. And of course, then they did more work and pushing pen and ink and touch and whatnot in Windows 10. And so I think that the purpose of Surface constantly changes without us really realizing it. Most recently, I think what we're going to see is Surface pushing ARM to encourage OEMs to adopt it more. And I think with the next year of Orion and the AI stuff, we're going to really see a combination of hardware, software, and experiences come together on Surface first. I think that's what we're going to see, and that will be Surface's purpose for the next year. It will be showcasing how hardware and software, when built together, can deliver AI experiences that aren't available anywhere else. So that, I think, is what we're going to see next in regards to Surface. So Panos Panay leaving overall, it is certainly a downer. I was a big fan of Panos Panay. I know he was quite polarizing. Some people liked him, some people didn't. I was a big fan of his presenting style. I was a big fan of his passion for the hardware and software he was working on. And with him gone, I certainly do feel like there's going to be there's a hole left in Microsoft where he once was. But I'm also a little bit hopeful. More so on the hardware side than the software side, believe it or not. I am a little bit worried about Windows and where that's going, but with hardware, I think we're okay. I think we're going to see Surface evolve and adapt, and with this more streamlined portfolio, I think we're going to see a lot more quality over quantity, I guess, is for lack of a better term. Yeah, it sucks that we're not going to get another Duo, at least for the time being, and another Surface Studio. But I don't think that's going to be the case forever. I think right now they are streamlining their portfolio, but that doesn't mean in the future they can start expanding again and trying new things. I don't see why that isn't a possibility. But for now, for the next year, they are only focusing on the stuff that makes them money. And yeah, it's their business. It's like, yeah, I guess that makes sense. They can't keep just throwing money into the fire because they want to make another dual screen phone.
Yeah, I mean, again, not to rehash this, but like the economy hasn't been great.
No.
The boom in laptops has definitely dropped. We still never have known whether Surface Division makes a profit, or they could have been losing money every quarter, and they just bit the bullet and said, well, we're setting the standard here for design and quality, or maybe they were breaking even, and then probably something happened in the last couple quarters where we have seen a pretty big drop in Surface revenue, which should be telling of And at the end of the day, it's the business. And I think that's what the leadership team probably decided, where, Panos was probably more on the side of like Xbox, where like, no, we build this hardware, to set the stage for the next stuff. And yeah, the phone thing is really frustrating because when I still pick up my Duo 2, it's still just like, damn, there is nothing like that hardware. Like it is still really, really nice hardware. And it would have been really cool to see them take that further. But listen, like I don't think they sold a lot of them, and that mountain to climb. We were talking about that recently, right? How do you do a Duo 3 when the perception is the first two were such duds?
Yeah.
How do you crawl back to that? So from that, it would have been a tough problem. So do you think, and people of course asking, do you think Duo 3 is absolutely just gone now?
Yeah, then to my knowledge, they're not actively working on another Surface Duo. Currently, things change. I don't know what the plan is in the next year ahead. I don't think we'll see one in 2024. I'd be very shocked if we see a new phone in 2024. I think we can probably talk about this now because it's unlikely to happen, but there was this vision, this idea, and we've sort of teased it on the podcast before, but with the next version of Windows coming next fall, the idea that they were going to have like a new Surface Pro, a new Surface laptop, and a new Surface Duo launching at the same time. Duo running Android, of course, the new laptops running Windows 12, we'll call it for this example. With the UIs are very similar across both, and you'd be able to basically have very similar interfaces. You'd have a home screen on the Duo, and the floating dock along the bottom would be the same across PC and phone. You'd have the same sort of widgets board for the activity center on the Duo, vice versa. Stuff like that. There was this idea of a coherent sort of push, and then Phone Link, of course, would be the one that ties things together and whatnot. That would have been cool with the foldable Duo 3, which was going to have like a single screen foldable and stuff. Because then at that point, that would just look like the tablet Windows interface on the foldable screen on the phone, right? That was kind of the plan. And to my knowledge, that's not happening now. Because the problem with Duo is that it requires a dedicated team to handle the OS. And that's just another round of resources and paying people that they don't want to be doing. If Duo was a Windows device, it'd actually be easier for them to ship it, believe it or not. It's because the Duo has such a massive resource pull in regards to not just the hardware, but the software side as well, and then continued support, that it doesn't make sense to be made currently. Like I said, if it was a Windows device, that wouldn't be an issue. You just build Windows, and Windows does its own thing, and they just load Windows onto it, build the drivers, they're done. But... yeah, so no, I would be shocked if next fall we see another.
And we should be, we're kind of lucky even to have duos because they were canceled a long time ago.
Yeah.
They just threw a Hail Mary pass and said, "Oh, screw it, let's save the hardware and try to put Android on it and see if we could do something with that." So the fact even we had two versions of it, I think was, we're pretty lucky. But yeah, it's a shame that we won't have probably a third version. And I get it. Nadella's never been a hardware guy. I don't think he's been a phone guy. And then you're also talking about you're running a device that runs your competitor's operating system.
Yeah.
I got the vision though, that Panos wanted with this thing, which was they would have made it closer and closer to Windows and compatibility. So it would have been a great companion device to whatever Surface laptop or thing you had, and built around this idea of productivity. So I still believe in that. I think that was a really cool goal, but you're right. You have an Android team whose sole purpose and the only thing they're really doing is to maintain and build this phone's operating system out, and not do anything else, unless they expanded their portfolio to like maybe a single screen device or other things. That could make sense, but you need to sell phones to make that happen, and they just weren't doing it. So because you said that they were considering a single screen device, but if they didn't have the numbers to do it, it'd been a tough sell.
There was a brief discussion, to my knowledge, with the Android team where they were thinking about turning their version of Android into something that OEMs could buy and load onto their own hardware. So OnePlus or Xiaomi or somebody, for example, could go to Microsoft and say, "Hey, we want to build an Android phone. Can we use your version of Android?" And that would have been a way for Microsoft to turn that division into a moneymaker, if you will. But it never got off the ground by the sounds of things, and now it's all dead.
Anywho, let's. I guess we're moving on to what was next.
We'll ad read real quick.
Oh, yep. There we go. Do our sponsor.
So thank you very much indeed for sponsoring this episode of the podcast. When it comes to hiring, don't wait for great talent to find you. Find them first with Indeed. When you're hiring, you need Indeed. Indeed is the hiring platform where you can attract, interview, and hire all in one place. Instead of spending hours on multiple job sites searching for candidates with the right skills, Indeed is a powerful hiring platform that can help you do it all. They streamline hiring with powerful tools that find you match candidates, and with Instant Match, over 80% of employers get quality candidates whose resumes on Indeed matches their job description the moment they sponsor a job, according to Indeed's data. One of the things we think is pretty great about Indeed is that candidates you invite to apply are 3 times more likely to apply. I've lost my way. 3 times more likely to apply to your job than candidates who only see it in search. Even better, Indeed's the only job site where you only pay for applications that meet your must-have requirements. Indeed is an unbelievably powerful hiring platform, delivering 4 times more hires than all other job sites combined, according to Talent Nest. So join more than 3 million businesses worldwide that uses Indeed to hire great talent fast. Start hiring now with a $75 sponsored job credit to upgrade your job post at Indeed.com/WCP. That offer is good for a limited time only. That's Indeed.com/WCP for a $75 credit. Indeed.com/WCP. And tell them you heard about it from us. Thank you very much for sponsoring. Real quick, terms and conditions do apply. Need to hire, you need Indeed. Thank you very much for sponsoring. And now we should move on to the other news of the couple of weeks we missed. And that is the Windows 11 update. We sort of briefly mentioned it during the Surface event recap. But we'll dive into it a bit more here. This update is actually really nice. Me and Dan were just talking about it before we started the podcast. We're really impressed with some of the new features in here. Things like OCR and snipping tool. The snipping tool improvements in general. They've got a new user interface that streamlines it, which is really nice to see. Notepad now will remember your saved content when you close it. So if you don't save a file and you hit X, you can reload Notepad and it will still be there when you get back, which is really awesome to see. Photos has a whole bunch of new features in it, including the ability to blur your background. Paint now has layers and the ability to remove a background, which is really nice. And it's also getting, as we mentioned, DALL-E 3 image generation capabilities as well in the near future, which is really nice to see. Windows Copilot, of course, is the star of the show there. But what was curious about this update was that it's not 23H2, even though that's how Microsoft has been testing it throughout the last 4 months. And that took us all by surprise. Everyone posted that this was 23H2 before having to make corrections, say, actually, sorry, this is not 23H2. And I just couldn't fathom why this was happening. I don't know why Microsoft decided to ship the update as not 23H2. So I did ask around. I asked some sources. And Turns out the reason for this is because it's political essentially, or it's policy driven. Moment updates, which is kind of what Microsoft has been using to deliver features to Windows 11 2022 all throughout the year, are not optional for end users. They are rolled into the monthly Patch Tuesday updates, and so you get it whether you like it or not. That is why Microsoft has decided to turn 23H2 into a moment update for 22H2. They decided this quite late in the game, to my knowledge, and what they've done it because users can no longer avoid things like Copilot or the new changes they've added to 23H2 in general. So we're getting we're getting Moment for 22H2 now with all of the 23H2 features, and then 23H2 itself will launch in the next couple of months, probably in November or late October, and that will be the release that at this point has technically nothing new in it. Maybe it'll have one or two minor things, but that will serve as simply a support cycle clock reset, as well as a jumping on point for OEMs and stuff to preload the new version of Windows onto new hardware. It's also a milestone point for all of the moment updates in the last year, which will now be on by default and enabled out of box. And that's what 23H2 will serve. 23H2 is an optional update. All of the annual feature updates that launch in the second half are optional. And so Microsoft didn't want to keep all those new features exclusive to 23H2 because a lot of users could say no to it. And they want Copilot in front of as many people as possible, as soon as possible, so they can tell shareholders that Copilot is a success. So that's the reasoning behind it all. But yeah. What do you think, Dan?
So I actually really like this update. And a lot of it's because of the smaller stuff, right? I think snipping tools improvements is really kind of cool. The Copilot stuff is interesting. I don't get why when I go to the what do you call it, the breakout panels, the widgets on the left-hand side, that slides out as a translucent panel over my existing windows. But when I open up Copilot, it pushes any app to it out of the way.
Yeah.
And like it just shoves your app over and pops out. And then when you close it, it doesn't, it's rude. It doesn't pull the app back.
Oh, does it not? It's supposed to.
Oh, not on mine. It hasn't been doing that. Let's see. Oh, okay. Actually, it did just work. It did just work.
It's supposed to put it back. Yeah.
No. Okay. Yeah. But I've had it a couple times where it didn't and just left a gap. I was like, okay, that's still. I think they can improve. They need to make that translucent.
Yes, I agree fully. It should be using Mika for sure. I don't know why it's not.
Yeah.
This is a prime example of Microsoft launching something before it's ready, because it's launching without plugins, to my knowledge. It's launching. It does feel a little rough. It's certainly slow, and that's actually another topic I wrote today, talking about Copilot. The experience is slow. More often than not, you can find the answer you're looking for faster by doing a traditional search than using Copilot. In fact, I timed it. The Rihanna example I used earlier, what was Rihanna's last album, asking Copilot took 16 and a half seconds to get an answer. I punched that exact same question into Bing, and it gave me the second in 0.5 seconds. It gave me the answer in 0.5 seconds. It's so much slower to use Copilot. The only time where Copilot makes more sense, other than the plugin scenario, obviously plugins enhance it in a number of different ways, but if you're just doing sort of internet queries, the only time where using Copilot makes more sense is if you're asking it multiple things at once. So the example I've used before, how many Xbox Series X retail boxes can I fit in the back of my Tesla Model 3? That is a great question for Copilot, because there's a number of different things in there.
So it's supposed to be handling in the sense that when you ask a basic query, it's supposed to just use Bing and get you the answer.
It's not.
Whereas when you ask something more depth, it's supposed to go to the cloud and use AI. And they're doing that for their own reasons, which is to save on processing power and that stuff. But you're right. I mean, I will say, though, on Android, they need to make, we've said this too before, they need to make the option for Bing Chat to be your default assistant, which would make it way better. But when I do use it, what's kind of cool is I can ask it like an in-depth question, minimize it, and then she just reads off the entire answer to me, which is kind of cool to have instead of sitting there staring at your phone. You just put the phone down, especially if you're trying to prove a point with someone else around you. You're like, listen to this. So I actually do find that really useful. But yeah, speed is definitely a problem. unless you're paying for it. And that's how that's going to get solved, is somehow you end up paying for it, because that's how all these models are currently working at this point. But
I wouldn't be surprised if next year as well we start to see portions of the AI locally rendered, especially with Intel 14th Gen and the upcoming Orion stuff with the NPUs, which are supposed to be significantly more powerful than the current NPUs we've got. I have seen conversations internally which seem to suggest they are thinking about loading at least some of the large language model onto local hardware so that for basic queries like that, it can render it all locally. And if it needs to reach out to the cloud, it can do to find information and whatnot, of course. And that should hopefully improve speed and stuff, but we'll see if that comes to be in the next year, of course. But yeah, my biggest complaint with Copilot right now is, other than the fact that it's kind of basic in regards to a Windows assistant, the other thing is it's just slow. It's much slower than doing a traditional search, unless, of course, as I mentioned, you're doing a multiple queried search, in which case it will find all the information for you much faster than you possibly could, and that's when it's pretty awesome.
Also, I have to say, I don't know, the slide out vertical feature, I don't know. Like, I don't know if I would have liked that design or something that pops up from the bottom.
So over the taskbar. The reason it's a sidebar is because Microsoft envisions you using it in conjunction with an app. That's why it's there. And not an over. Because if it was just a thing that popped up from the taskbar, when you click away from it, it would minimize again. But what Microsoft thinks you will want is to be able to see the content it's generating for you as you're working in, say, Photoshop or something. So that's why it is the way it currently is. But again, this is all stuff that Microsoft is exploring now for the next version of Windows. How better can they implement Copilot versus right now, which is essentially a shortcut to a Edge panel, right? It's powered by Edge under the hood, and that's what it is. It's a very basic implementation, but with the next version of Windows, they are looking at more deeply integrating this sort of stuff so that Windows works for you more like an autopilot. Again, this is a conversation for another day, but that's what kind of where we're going with this. This Copilot stuff is day one stuff. It's very much the beginning of this journey, and it's going to become a lot more advanced and complex as we move into 2024 and 2025. But that's the basic rundown of the Windows Fall update, as we're calling it. Who knows what to call this, because moment updates famously have no name, so everyone's sort of scrambled as to what we should call this. I think we settled on calling it the September updates. Others called it the Copilot update. You can call it what you like. I'm calling it 23H2 because that's what it is. It's 23H2 early, and then the actual 23H2 comes in a few weeks. But yeah, what a mess, Microsoft. Thanks for making that more complex for us. Moving on real quick to the Windows 7 news. So you may or may not be familiar with the Windows 10 free upgrade period, which was the case between 2015 and 2016. For the first year of Windows 10's life, Windows 7 and Windows 8 users could upgrade to Windows 10 for free, no questions asked. And to achieve this, Microsoft built into Windows 10 the same database, I guess, of product keys that Windows 7 and Windows 8 used to activate Windows 10. So if you had a Windows 7 Pro key or a Home key, you could use that to activate Windows 10 Home or Pro. If you had a Windows 8 Home or Pro key, you could activate that on Windows 10 as well, and it would work. Now, that was only supposed to be the case for the first year of Windows 10's life on the market. But then the 1 year anniversary came and went, and you could still upgrade from Windows 7 to Windows 8 to Windows 10. And that kept being the case forever, up until recently, believe it or not. So even though Microsoft said it was a year, and people had asked Microsoft since, and they were like, "Yep, no, it's certainly just a year." Wink. They have now closed that loophole officially, or they are closing it as we speak. So if you have been using Windows 7 and Windows 8 keys to activate Windows 10, that will no longer work very soon. Now, because Windows 11 was more or less just Windows 10 with a fresh coat of paint, those keys were also able to activate Windows 11. And that's what I've been doing to activate VMs and stuff. I've been using old Windows 7 keys that I had from TechNet back in the day. But that's no longer going to be the case starting very soon as well. In fact, the latest Windows Canary builds, to my knowledge, are also already rejecting Windows 7 and Windows 8 keys. The production builds are still okay, but I'm sure there's an update coming very soon that will disable it. So if you are somebody who has been using that method to activate Windows up until now, you're going to have to start buying legitimate keys, I think. If you're already activated, I think you'll be safe. I think it's just for anyone who's not used a key before, maybe. I don't know exactly how it's going to work from a technical perspective, but I think if you're already activated, you will remain activated. So don't worry about that. I think it's just for those trying to apply a new Windows 7 or new old Windows 7, Windows 8 keys on Windows 10 or 11. Dan, have you ever used Windows 7 or 8 keys to activate a new Windows PC?
Come on. No.
No? I do it all the time. I used to, because for those who don't know, TechNet used to be as a resource for IT technicians and stuff. You'd be able to pay. I think it was an annual subscription or something like that. It wasn't too expensive. I think it was like £200 or £300 or dollars, and that would get you basically a database of product keys. You could request keys for Windows 7 Pro or Windows 8 Pro, and you could use them on PCs. And it was supposed to be for ITs to do testing and stuff, but they didn't they didn't ask for credentials as an IT admin before you signed up. So I had a TechNet account, and that's where I was getting keys from. And then so I've been using them up to this day. Like my current the HP Envy I'm using came with Windows 11 Home. I'm not having Windows 11 Home. Put my Windows 7 Pro key in, upgraded to Pro. I've been using Windows 11 Pro since. So, I've been using them, and that's going to be a real shame that you're no longer going to be able to do that. Okay, moving on to the next massive. This is probably the biggest story of the 2 weeks that I've missed. So the FTC versus Microsoft stuff has been ongoing for quite some time now. I personally wish it would end, but it hasn't and won't. And Microsoft had uploaded a number of documents to the FTC side, of course, so they could use it in court. But I don't know how they found this, but one of the documents they uploaded was incorrectly redacted. On the surface, it looked fine. Like if you open the file, it was fine and there was nothing really interesting in it. But if you opened it in Adobe Acrobat or some other PDF reader and you looked at the attachments, there was a whole bunch more hidden in the file that were not redacted. And as a result of that, the next 10 years of the Xbox plan more or less leaked in the span of minutes. So a lot was in here. We'll start with the stuff coming next in 2024 and 2025. There is a new Xbox Series X on the way. This is a sort of mid-gen refresh, if you will. This always seems to be the case with consoles. There's always a mid-gen refresh. We had it with the Xbox One, with the One S and the One X. We're getting it as well with the Xbox Series X in the next year or so. This is an updated design, which is still a tower, but instead of it being a block, like a rectangle, it's now spherical, which is an interesting choice for sure. Not only that, it's supposed to be more energy efficient. It's supposed to have more storage out the gate, so 2 terabytes of storage, and it's supposed to launch at the same $499 starting price. Now, this is super interesting because this is the first time ever we've seen the next Xbox leak this early, especially in regards to design. Microsoft touts, and it's not just the design; it's basically the full specs list. So Microsoft in the document mentions it has updated technologies, an all-new South Bridge to modernize I/O and sustainability efforts, Wi-Fi 6E radios, Bluetooth 5.2, 6 nanometer die shrink for improved efficiency. They've reduced the PSU power by 15%, new low power standby mode, which is 20% of current Xbox Series S standby mode, increased use of PCR and housing to 30%, 100% recyclable packaging. USB-C on the front. Basically everything that you would need to know about the console has now leaked thanks to these documents. And that's wild. There was also a new controller coming.
Excuse me, Phil Spencer told me that it's out of date. And
of course he did, yeah. So that's probably true. I mean, these documents are a year old already, and perhaps the design they were looking at was a little bit more aspirational than realistic, and maybe they've made changes there. I for sure think that the USB-C port will probably be a USB-A port on the front. Who knows? Stuff like that will certainly change, but there's no question that a refreshed Xbox Series X is coming next year. There's no doubt about it. That's definitely happening. But yeah, you're right. Some of the design elements or features may have changed. I don't think much of it will change. I certainly think the idea of it being more energy efficient with faster Wi-Fi and stuff will almost certainly be the case. There's no reason for them to not do that, right? So yeah, that's certainly happening. Then there's also a new controller coming, a new sort of more haptic controller to my knowledge. It's codenamed Sibyl. The new console's codenamed Brooklyn, and then the controller's codenamed Sibyl. So we have Xbox Wireless 2 protocol, direct-to-cloud capabilities. Now, for those who don't know what that means, it's very similar to the Stadia controller. For those who don't know about that, the Stadia controller didn't connect using Bluetooth to your TV or whatever device it was you were using. It connected directly to your Wi-Fi. And that was supposed to improve latency, because instead of sending a Bluetooth signal to your TV, which would then send a Wi-Fi signal to your router, which would then connect to the cloud and then go to the server where the game is to control, you bypass that first bit, so you just connect it straight to the Wi-Fi, to the internet, to the server where the game is. That's supposed to improve latency, and so the next Xbox controller will be able to do that as well, which is cool. They also say it has precision haptic feedback, an improved accelerometer, quieter buttons and thumbsticks, lift to wake, which is nice, and so on and so forth. So lots of big updates coming to the Xbox in the next year or so. But as I mentioned, this leak was the next 10 years of Xbox. And so there's a lot here to get through. Dan, before we dive into it, any thoughts on the next Xbox Series X?
I don't even have the current generation, so no.
Okay, that's fair. All right, so in that case, we'll move on to the next thing. So there was, in this document as well, there was the next generation of gaming at Microsoft, which was a discussion the senior leadership team must have been having internally, or a group of people were having internally, where they were laying out the plan for the next Xbox, not the next Series X, but the next generation of Xbox, which is currently targeting 2028. Now, this is a fascinating look at what it takes to build a console. You know, basically this was, to my knowledge, last year. This was dated. So this is them basically getting together and talking about what they need to put together to make the next Xbox. And they're talking about hybrid computing, AI and machine learning, ARM. Apparently, the next console they are considering ARM 64 for the processor versus AMD Zen 6. You know, stuff like this. And now none of this is settled yet, right? So none of this is locked in, but they are certainly talking about it. And the fact that they are looking at ARM, I think, tells you a lot about where ARM's going in the next 10 years. They're targeting 2028, so they must have a feeling. They must be speaking with Qualcomm or whoever it is they're talking to, where Qualcomm's telling them, yes, by 2028, we will have a chip that's good enough to power 8K gaming, 4K, 120 hertz gaming, who knows what they're targeting, but stuff like that. That's going to be wild, you know, and that's a mobile chip that's going to scale, of course, up and down laptops, phones, etc., etc. So that's insane to think about on its own. NPU, it's supposed to have an NPU. They seem to be certainly planning for that, which is quite interesting. DirectX ray tracing, next gen, global illumination, etc., etc. And there's also mentions of a thin OS. Now, this is curious, and a lot of people are asking me about this because there was actually some transcripts between Phil Spencer, Panos Panay, Satya Nadella, Jason Ronald, where they're talking about sort of aligning for the vision for the next generation of Xbox. So Satya Nadella says, what is our big unifying bet? Is it that everything starts with the cloud? We should use that big bet to drive systems architecture clarity. Jason Ronald then says, that's right, just a touch on input. We need deep immersion, la la la. And then Satya Nadella says, is our future really just xCloud? And as the whole discussion goes on, Satya Nadella says the core of our silicon is in the data center or the console. Jason Ronald says, we think about how our silicon scales across devices from low-end devices up to the cloud. Then Panos Panay says, there are synergies with what we are doing. Phil Spencer then says, we have to make a call on silicon in the next 6 months. Satya Nadella then says, today we have 3 workloads, xCloud, Win365, and Mesh. My dream is to have a standard Azure parts to power all 3 workloads with fungibility across, then at the edge, fungibility across, sorry, and then at the edge, it needs to be hybrid that is common across next-gen HoloLens, Xbox, and Win365. We can do this. Phil Spencer says, that's right. I'm not sure if Mesh and xCloud are different. Satya Nadella says, that's right. It's all a game. I don't want the hardware to be different. And then Phil Spencer says, I think that's true at the platform too. And then they skip ahead to something called Thin OS. Satya Nadella says, have you looked at Win3? ? Panos Panay says, I'll walk Phil and Jason through it. You can leverage our work. Then Panos Panay says, where are developers heading on ARM versus x64? Jason Waddle says, the developer ecosystem is familiar with x64. Inertia says it stays on that path, but performance gain, sustainability, and the cost of difference means that we should do the diligence on ARM. We need to finalize our decision criteria so that we can make a decision by the end of this quarter. Or let's see, fiscal year. And then Satya Nadella goes on and says, as I look at this, we have 4 systems that need to compose. Hybrid AI-assisted graphics subsystem, input stack, and hybrid video. We're building 4 types of computers, cloud everything, a hybrid Xbox, hybrid Windows, and hybrid HoloLens. We need to bring the company's systems talent together to align on a unified vision. We can't go from big idea to big idea. We need a single big idea to rally the company around. So there's a lot there. But I think it confirms a few things. This idea of hybrid Windows, hybrid Xbox, hybrid HoloLens, believe it or not, this idea of hybrid computing is going to become a lot more of a thing in the next half decade or leading into 2028. I've already seen plans for the next version of Windows where they're already leaning into this hybrid idea. Windows 365 is the start of this. They absolutely plan to launch that for consumers at some point. And the idea where you can offload applications and workloads to the cloud is coming, and that's going to be the case on Xbox, It's going to be the case on Windows PCs, and apparently it's going to be the case on HoloLens. Satya Nadella makes multiple references to the next generation of HoloLens in these conversations, which is interesting. Of course, the story of HoloLens 3 being cancelled has been a thing in the media, and I fully believe that was the case. Whatever Satya Nadella is talking about here is beyond HoloLens 3. This is a future-leaning VR or AR headset that they are clearly planning to build at some point. Then there was mention of ThinOS and Win 3. This ties into Core PC, more or less. Win 3 is a level. It's a component level internally. This is going to be very internal terminology speak. There's essentially 4 levels of it. There's Win 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. So technically 5 levels. Win 3 is basically the very basic level you can use to build an end user product. So Xbox, if they wanted to use ThinOS, would use Win 3 and then they'd build it out and it becomes whatever it's going to become. It's a continuation of the core OS stuff, more or less. And Xbox will probably do all sorts of weird things to it to make it run multiple OSs and whatnot like they currently do. But that's what that is. And things like the Chrome OS version of Windows that I've been hearing about, that will be also based on Win 3 or Win 4 and stuff like that. So this is the next generation of the modern version of Windows we've been talking about with Core PC, more or less. And then they also, as I mentioned, talk about the next exports a lot. And the fact that they are considering ARM is wild. They also talk about all sorts of technical stuff, which I'm not going to get into here because it's frankly quite boring. They've got timelines of things. The first dev kit's planned for 2027, for example. They're going to decide whether or not to use ARM64. I think they've actually made the decision now. We don't know what that decision was, but because this was at the beginning of 2022, they made the decision late 2022. I would love it if they did decide to go with ARM, right? That would be amazing. That would also be a big blow to AMD. Actually, maybe AMD could make the ARM processor, right? Is there a reason why AMD couldn't do ARM? I don't think so, right?
I mean, there's no reason, but they haven't started, as far as I know. So, yeah, there has been rumors that been doing stuff with ARM, but I think it's more partnering with Samsung or something like that. I don't think it's like Intel. Intel's currently not doing anything with ARM as a processor. It would be pretty late to turn that around. So this leak is just wild. It's insane that this leaked in its form. It's basically their vision for the next generation of Xbox, and that's probably quite damaging to Microsoft, because Sony could see this stuff now and go, oh, they're considering ARM. Interesting. We were never considering ARM. And now that shapes the next PlayStation as well, right? Because they're like peeking over the fence. They're seeing what the competition's getting up to, whereas normally this would be fully confidential stuff. And the way it leaked is frankly wild. You know, people were blaming the FTC for this, but it wasn't the FTC's fault, apparently. The FTC came out afterwards and said, no, don't blame us. This is all Microsoft submitted these documents as they were. We didn't touch them. We weren't supposed to redact anything further. That was all on Microsoft, and that's their fault for submitting what they submitted. And yeah, Microsoft is probably kicking themselves as a result of this. But yeah, I mean, Dan, what are your thoughts on this leak as a whole? I mean, it's unfortunate it happened. I'm sure, this is the problem when you have to turn over reams and reams of paperwork and emails and all that kind of stuff. So it's unfortunate, some of it. I think, stuff has changed or will change and all that kind of stuff, but it's a pretty good insight into where they're going. I'm sure Sony was probably really interested in this, of course. But it goes to show you also what we've been talking about for years now, the power of ARM and how it's going to grow and become more and more important, including into gaming, because Qualcomm's always had very good GPUs. Actually, that's always been a thing with them. They just, and goes for on Windows devices too. The GPUs are actually very good. The problem is the software is not optimized to leverage it. Hopefully that's going to change though. I think Microsoft, is going to lean more and more into ARM because in a lot of ways it's the future. That's not to say that Intel, I have high hopes for where Intel's going with its. Basically, I think where Intel is going with its x86 stuff is going to be not that discernible from what ARM is going to be able to do. I really do think that, but it's still going to be kind of interesting, which I guess leads us to our next story and final story for the week, which is this report that came out from what was the site again here? Semi-Accurate, which is a pretty funny title. I actually know the person who runs that site and writes these articles. I've been hung out with him multiple times on these Intel trips, and so he is very knowledgeable and has very good sourcing on this stuff, and has been talking about Qualcomm and Orion's chips for a while. And I've heard two things with the Orion chipset. I heard a year ago there were a lot of problems, and this thing wasn't like there was just a lot of issues, and they didn't know if they could do it. now I've heard they're exceeding expectations and that the performance and efficiency is actually above what they were anticipating, and it's actually going to be a very good chip, and that PC makers are actually very, very happy with the platform. That said, the story goes on to report that so there's these things called PMICs, power management integrated circuits. So they handle things like on battery operated devices, DC to DC conversions, which is weird, battery charging, power source selection, voltage scaling, and power sequencing. So yeah, this is the stuff that helps manage the power of the device to the processor. They're kind of universal, and like laptop makers can use various ones out there, but apparently Qualcomm is mandating that if you're going to use their chipset, you have to use their PMICs, which don't seem to be optimized completely for this platform, but are more optimized for smartphones. In that case, you require multiple ones of them. And so PC makers basically have to buy this as well from Qualcomm, and they don't have a choice because a lot of it's proprietary, but basically Qualcomm is saying our stuff works best with our stuff, and that's the reason why you need to use it, which is probably true. It's one reason why Apple's chipsets, their integration with memory tends to be very, very good as well. So apparently the PC makers, some of them were really upset about this and have threatened to cancel projects and all that. But what's happened is Qualcomm has basically ate the cost for these, what they would have charged the company. And in some cases, apparently they're like even undercharging overall and basically losing money. So I think for this first gen, what they're saying and hinting at here is that was semi-accurate, is that Qualcomm is going to kind of like not try to make a huge profit on these chips. They're going to sell them at cost or maybe lose money even just to flood the market and get them, because that's been the problem, right? With ARM, we get a device here, we get a device there. It's a little bit all over the place. We really rarely see sequels to them. So I think what they want to do is change that. So, and we've heard already, Qualcomm said recently that they've had a lot of design wins, meaning a lot of OEMs have signed up for this and will be releasing devices. I believe that's accurate. And I think they want to kind of flood the market with these devices to really make an impact versus like a one-off hero device like a Surface Pro 9, which helps, but you still need just your regular HPs, you need your regular Dells, your Lenovo's, all that to also be powered. I mentioned before, Lenovo is actually very big on ARM. They see this as a very important part of their growing catalog of devices and for future stuff. So the problem seems to have resolved itself, although it goes to show you that, a lot of companies do have issues with Qualcomm and the way that they behave sometimes. And it's business to business stuff, right? This is just what companies do. But Apple's had problems with Qualcomm's because there was a great story out this week, too, about it was a real damning story on Apple, how when they started making their own chips and processors, they were unhappy they had to rely on Qualcomm for the modems, the 5G modems. And so they said, screw it, we made a processor, let's make a modem. And they went out and hired a bunch of people. They had like 1,000 engineers, and they just went hard at it, and they couldn't do it. They just couldn't do it. The chip was like massive. It wouldn't fit into the phones. It wasn't power efficient. It got really hot. There was just a lot of issues. Now, that's not to say they stopped the project. They're going to continue at it, and I bet they will succeed at some point. But the point is, they're years behind on where they were supposed to be. This was supposed to come out like in 2020, and now it's been pushed back to, I think, 2024, 2025. But they want to really kind of get off of dealing with Qualcomm because they think they've been overcharged, and there's been court battles between them. So I get how some companies don't like Qualcomm. I mean, shoot, ARM Limited is suing Qualcomm. So they're accusing them of that the Ryan chipset uses some ARM proprietary design stuff, and therefore they should have a license with ARM to use this stuff. Qualcomm denies it, saying, no, this is all original hardware and design, and we don't need to, so that's going to go to court, and we'll see what happens there. The good news, that was another story that Semi-Accurate reported, and this gets to what I heard. Now, I heard this I mentioned I hung out with this guy who runs the site at Intel, but the info I just said about the performance being better than expected, it was from a different source from me. So it's not the same person here. So this is actually now two people saying the same thing. So he says that regarding Orion CPUs, that they perform, quote, slightly more than the Apple M2 cores, which goes that. So that's been the question here, right? Ever since this was announced in 2021 or 2020, like it's like, okay, they want to tackle and like take on Apple's M series chips. So the question is, like, what does that mean? Is it M1? Is it M2? Is it M3? Are they going to compete like with the M1 processor when M3 is about to come out? Um, so apparently we got the response now. They're slightly better than the Apple M2 cores, which is, listen, for a Gen 1 product, that's going to be good. Now, granted, by the time these come out, M3 chips will be out, so they won't be the fastest. But yo, M2, like, it's slightly better than M2. They can do that while delivering efficiency, and you can get that into like a Surface Pro device. That's going to be a really, really performant and awesome PC. I don't think they need to be M3 at a Gen 1 to compete effectively, because the problem I've said with this with Apple's products is now that their chips are so kind of good that year over year upgrades for the processor doesn't really matter much anymore. Most people are like, it's fast enough now. I'm getting really good battery life. Why do I need to, get the M3? Yeah, sure, the M3 is going to be more powerful. And for pros, right, real professional people, they're going to want that latest chip. I'm talking your average consumer. So if these can target and beat M2 processors, I would be very happy for a Gen 1 product. That's amazing because they're only going to improve it over that. In fact, I heard the Gen 2 isn't actually going to be a massive jump in performance. It's going to be a lot more refining of the chips and all that, kind of the tick-tock method that Intel uses with its chipsets, where it kind of goes, release is a big release. The second one is more modification, slightly faster, slightly better, but it's not a big jump. And then they do that again. So I think they're going to do the same thing here. So I'm already going to say the Gen 2 of one of the Orion chips probably won't be compete with the M3s. But I think most people, when they get these chips and these PCs, are going to be kind of blown away by the performance of them, slash the efficiency and battery life that they're going to gain from it. I think that's going to be a really big story. We will find out more about this just in a couple of weeks. As I mentioned, the Snapdragon Summit happens October 23rd through the 25th, I want to say, out in Hawaii. So I will be there covering this up. They're going to basically talk about the chips for the first time. Knowing how Qualcomm has done this stuff in the past with previous ARM processors for PCs, they're going to get up on stage. They're going to talk about the architecture. They're going to talk about, of course, performance, efficiency goals, and all this kind of stuff. And I bet you dollars to donuts they'll have reference design laptops running the processor that we'll actually get to go and try. We won't be able to, I bet, benchmark this stuff, although they'll probably provide their own benchmarks, which would be fair because these chips aren't expected, I don't think, to ship until maybe mid 2024. Actually widely available. I could be wrong in that. It could be a little bit earlier, but they're at this stage. They still are working on drivers and refinement and all that kind of stuff. So it doesn't surprise me if they want to hold back a little bit on that. But I think this is really good news for Qualcomm. I think this is the win that they need. I don't think now. I know people want this in like a Surface Go. I still think these chips are going to be premium chips. You'll see this in premium laptops, stuff in the $1,200 range and higher. So it's not going to be solve that goal, the mid-range stuff. But this is a new architecture. It's a new chip, right? Orion, and it could scale up to desktop, which is going to be the interesting thing. And so that's where eventually you're going to see, just like what Apple did with their architecture. So this will scale up to desktop, but at some point they should be able to scale down too and make a more affordable version as they get more mass produced and kind of get out there and the designs become refined, in which case we may see them come to more affordable PCs. But yeah, make no mistake, these will be probably in the very premium devices at first. I'll also say that historically ARM Windows PCs have been priced higher than people would appreciate. But when I've spoken to Qualcomm, they say that's not us. They say we sell the chips at competitive pricing. What the OEMs sell that device at is higher than what we would prefer. But that's what those companies have said, probably because they want to try, probably because they're going after enterprise and they can charge a little bit more. But that's not like Qualcomm's fault, according to Qualcomm. But we'll see. So I think it's going to be very exciting, going forward here with all the ARM stuff, as well as Intel 14 Gen. I don't know with AMD where they're going to be next year, but we'll have to see. But this is all really good stuff for Windows. Any thoughts, Zach?
Sorry, I was muted. Yeah. So I was going to say, Yeah, I'd heard similar things about the next gen ARM chips from sources at Microsoft who are very impressed with what Qualcomm has come up with, and obviously Microsoft will most likely be taking that design and customizing it a bit for their own Surface devices next year. To my knowledge, the next Surface Pro will of course have one of these chips in it, and I think they're planning to bring it to Surface Laptop as well. That will be a big moment again for Qualcomm and stuff, because that will be both mainstream Surface products now have an ARM option, and there's going to be a huge, to my knowledge, huge tie with AI, with the NPU stuff, which is supposed to be a big deal.
Yeah, Qualcomm's been way ahead of that for years already.
Yeah,
so
for sure. And the next version of Windows will tie heavily into the NPU and all that other stuff. So there's a big coherent vision coming next year with regards to all of this. We've been saying for a while, I feel like, that 2024 is going to be a big moment, a big inflection point for ARM and Windows and Surface. That's happening. We're getting close to it now. We're going to see.
I truly believe that. Yeah.
This is all going to come together as a coherent thing, and I think it's going to be wild. I think what we're really going to see in regards to what Windows can do when it does have an NPU and software that can utilize that NPU, that's going to be next level, I think. And so that's what we're expecting in the year ahead with the Orion stuff.
I also want to mention with some of the Microsoft stuff that came out this week and the new divisions and with Surface and Windows and panel sleeving, there was a mention of silicon, them building. Mm-hmm. So again, I want to clarify on that. That doesn't mean processor, like CPU.
Right.
Okay. It could. I doubt it. What that means, though, are things like coprocessors that they build for Surface for, say, pen and inking, or the special software hardware they build for Surface Hub to make that whole thing come to life. There's also their Pluton security chip, right? They do a lot of these smaller processors and circuits that do count as silicon. I think when people hear that word, they're immediately like, oh, they're making their own processors. I don't think they are. They may be doing some stuff with server. I wouldn't be surprised that there's, Microsoft Research has been doing stuff in chip design for a while, but to go from that to, mass producing chips for their own, I don't, for consumer PCs, which I think is what people are thinking, I think is a ludicrous dream. I think the idea that they could come out of the gates and just build a processor that blows everyone away, I think that's a dream that would never happen. I also don't understand what the motivation would be. We just talked about how awesome Orion is supposed to be and how happy OEMs are happy with the performance and the delivery of the efficiency. And then we have Intel 14th Gen, or Meteor Lake, I should say, which also looks to be an impressive thing. And they're not even done yet. Then you have Lunar Lake, which goes even further with efficiency and shrinks down the chips even further. That's 2024, 2025. Their partners are already kind of kicking butt here in the process. I don't know why Microsoft would be like, no, we need 4 now. We need 4 processor, types out there. That doesn't make sense. I think it makes sense to them talk about building specialized hardware and silicon for their devices or other things. So I just want to clarify that.
What's much more likely is Microsoft is working with Qualcomm on designs and ideas, and Qualcomm is the one that can build it. That's what I think we're seeing here currently with the
Sure. Yeah, they get feedback, but Intel was very public about the new Meteor Lake chips. They worked very closely, they said, with Microsoft, so that the technology behind that's making everything work actually works with the operating system at a high level. So that, and Qualcomm definitely works closely with Microsoft to optimize Windows where they can as well. So all that stuff is happens. But I don't think Microsoft's going to make their own CPUs.
That said, I do hear that the Microsoft is making its own silicon for Azure. That is a thing that is
for servers.
For servers. That is happening, and to my knowledge, that's supposed to start shipping towards the end of next year. That I don't know what that's based on. I know it's ARM, but I don't know what technology that's based. To my knowledge, it's supposed to be Microsoft's own design, but like I said, that they're not going into Surface hardware, to my knowledge, and it's not straight away. Next year will certainly be whatever I think Surface Laptop and Surface Pro uses. It will be a modified design of Qualcomm's chip, because that's what they've been doing with the SQ series so far, and it wouldn't surprise me if they take that and go, we'll overclock it slightly here, or maybe we'll give it a slightly more powerful NPU so it can do slightly different things, but it won't be Microsoft's fully custom design, I don't think. Not in Surface devices, not yet.
Yeah. Very cool. All right, we have just a few minutes for Q&A. If we want to do that with the audience, we can do that. Start firing off questions now in our live chat. Otherwise, you can follow me on Twitter at Daniel_Rubino, Rubino. I'm also on Threads, the same address. Follow Zach as ZACBOWDEN on both Twitter and Threads as well. We should be back at our normal time next week, Friday, 1:30 p.m. Or we'll see. I don't know. This is not a terrible time to do the podcast either. Seems like some people are happy with it. So maybe, but I have some other meetings sometimes in the morning. It makes it a little difficult, but we'll see about that. Otherwise, as always, thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you next time. Take care, everyone.
Wonderful. So, yes, if you have any questions, now's the time to answer them. We are doing the show early today because we have some commitments at the usual time that would mean we couldn't do the show again, and we can't keep delaying the show, the biggest show of the year, so we had to do it early today. So yes, if there are any questions that you have about any of the recent announcements or leaks, do let us know. We'll try our best to answer them. Anyone in Europe here who managed to get Copilot despite GDPR/DMA/DSA? I've not. Well, I mean, I'm not in the EU anymore, no. So I have Copilot in the UK.
You also have Boris Johnson.
Not anymore.
I know. Actually, we can't talk here in America with the clowns we have.
Yeah. Do you think you'll have Panos Panay on a future episode of the Windows Central podcast? It would be great, but I'm sure his NDA says he's not allowed.
He's not going to be able to, let me tell you everything we were working on. That would be cool. But yeah, I'm sure there's, unless we kept it to a very high level general discussion of design and technology, which maybe we could do. I would love to have that conversation with him. But
I'd sit him down and be like, all right, tell me about Andromeda. What happened?
Hey, at the very least, I mean, the idea of a dual screen Kindle is...
Yeah, right? I'm so excited for that. I want that to happen. I definitely... All they need to do is take the Duo, replace the LCDs with e-ink displays. That's it. That's the new Kindle. I'm buying that.
Yeah.
How do you think Microsoft can make the Windows developer community actually care about ARM? Most of us don't. Well, it will just be in regards to normalcy. ARM is not going away. It will continue to be here, and it will slowly gain traction, and it will be a competitor amongst Intel and AMD. You will find laptops that have ARM in it just as casually as you find Intel and AMD laptops. At some point, developers will see we'll see that it's necessary to invest in it because it's everywhere. You are going to find OEMs from the likes of Dell and HP and Microsoft who are just shipping ARM things now. And if you want your app to be the best on that device, you need to optimize it. And so that's how it's going to go. ARM does not go away. There's no point where ARM gets defeated in the Windows space. It's just not going to happen. It sticks around as a virus, if you will. It's not going anywhere. It's going to keep infecting things until people just adopt it. Snapdragon was making ARM chips for low mid-level Chromebooks like Lenovo's Duet 5, but that partnership was just ended. Snapdragon 7C Gen 2, I wonder how that would have performed on a Surface Go. It would have performed worse than the Intel N200. That's what I don't think people realize how good the Intel N200 is. It's quite good. I think Intel Core i5 level performance for like 11th gen, I think, or something like that. It's not bad at all. Which Surface lineups do you see being cancelled now that Panos is gone? Or on the flip side, which families will get more love? So as we've already talked about it, but Surface Studio and Surface Duo are sort of the key highlights for being cut from the line, at least for now. We're not expecting any new models from that for the foreseeable future. I think we're going to see Surface Laptop get more love. I think the next gen Surface Laptop is supposed to be quite a big upgrade, and it's about time. We've had 5 generations of the same design, more or less, and the next one I'm hearing will be finally a refreshed design with that makes it more MacBook Air competitive, to my knowledge. Yeah, I was intrigued about the idea of a Surface Duo Go with plastic just because of durability. That would have been perfect for a Kindle. Yeah, I so wish that Duo Go, that plastic Duo, would have had been official. That would have been awesome.
Definitely.
All right, any more questions? If there are no questions, we will be heading off. So last call for questions. We do have to be gone in about 10 minutes anyway, so Get them in
5
now.
minutes.
5 minutes.
I gotta take care of some stuff. All right, yeah, let's pop off. I gotta take care of a couple things here.
Okay, cool. Thank you everybody for tuning in. We'll be back next Friday. Follow us on Twitter. We'll keep you updated when we go live. But until then, we will see you next time. Bye.